Awesome. We'll give it a couple minutes for people to trickle in here and then get started.
Very good.
Hello, everyone. Just seeing everyone trickle in here. We'll get started in about a minute or two. Awesome. Alrighty, let's kick this off today, why don't we? Hello, everyone. I'm Nicole Rathie, the project manager here at AI for Manufacturing Canada. Welcome to our webinar today. We will be exploring Industry 4.0 playbooks and how to unleash a data-driven, innovative, and high business value opportunities. Today, we'll be joined by John Nicolopoulos, of the VP of Partnerships and Sales at KPI Digital. John is an expert in mobile, cloud, telecom, and global IT technology. Over his career, he has been able to bring success to a variety of industries, including manufacturing, as we are here today. We will have a Q&A session at the end of our session today. Please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box or hop off mic at the end of our session for a discussion. Without further delay, I will pass it off to John.
Very good, Nicole. Thank you for the introduction and for the opportunity to present, I think, a very interesting topic that is expecting to generate all sorts of changes, opportunities, and challenges. And hopefully we'll unpack some of those today, and my presentation will provide you some interesting questions to pursue. We look forward to engaging you to continue the conversation after this webinar. So we talked about my background. So as Nicole mentioned, 30 years in the tech industry. I'm published author. I'm a senior member of the IEEE and worked in diverse verticals, but heavy focus in manufacturing, logistics, and telecom. Spent most of my career in the manufacturing sector in both startups and large enterprises. Most recently, I was at Accenture. Previously to that, I was at Nortel. Joined KPI Digital a couple of years ago to lead sales and partnerships. Very quickly, who's KPI? You could see the numbers on the top, but in effect, we're a hybrid consulting and software development firm. You can see on the left there, the bottom left, deep manufacturing supply chain expertise. On the talent side, we straddle the full spectrum in terms of AI, decision optimization, conventional BI, and governance. And on the consulting perspective, we are heavily focused on the full data strategy value chain. We do have several software development groups. I'm leading one of them on the smart cities, and there's another one that is involved in mining, and both of those have very strong Industry 4.0 interlocks. This manufacturing expertise is, translates to, I think, pretty well-defined positive business outcomes through our structured customer engagement framework. I'll mention a little bit about that toward the end of the presentation. And our approach inherently is a low-risk, high ROI, minimum viable architecture strategy approach. And we've made significant investments in Industry 4.0 smart manufacturing accelerators and associated partnerships, in particular with Microsoft and IBM, as well as several others. What's the agenda today? We'll talk about Industry 4.0. I think that term is causing so much confusion. We'll look at the full business impact of Industry 4.0. We'll talk about the technology spectrum, which is vast. Drill down on some of the high ROI, data-driven, smart manufacturing use cases. Sustainability is such a hot term these days, so we'll try to connect the dots between Industry 4.0 and sustainability. We'll look at some of the key challenges that we're seeing today with Industry 4.0. And then we'll unpack a few tidbits with regards to a pragmatic approach to developing a differentiated high return Industry 4.0 playbook. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this or a version of the slide, but moving from, you could see there in the middle of the slide, from lean manufacturing, 30, 40 odd years ago, where a lot of the components of some of the advanced manufacturing today were initially established. Things started taking a dramatic turn, I would say, in circa 2011, when Industry 4.0 was first coined in the context of the industrial German manufacturing context. So that's why I put that date there, and you could see the some of the characteristics of this Industry 4.0 in terms of cyber physical systems. You could see the shift at the bottom there from green to sustainable manufacturing, and really moving into a domain of what I call innovation acceleration. This is what Industry 4.0 brings to the table. There's many different perspectives out there. You look at the OEMs, they've got their own agenda. Sometimes it's very product specific or software specific. And the web scalers, it's traditionally all about consumption on their cloud native infrastructures. But what do the standards say? It's quite interesting with all the debate with Industry 4.0. I think the marketeers have really taken over this term over the last 10 years, but I think the standards finally said enough's enough. And curiously, in 2021, you could see at the bottom there, they ditched Industry 4.0 and they started adopting the concept of smart manufacturing to better reflect this converging global consensus. And you can see the definition there, what this means from the latest standards perspective in terms of the cyber, physical, and human spheres to address diverse enterprise value chains. In terms of the business impact, it's amazing when I speak to a lot of enterprises or some leaders. For them, Industry 4.0, it's all about the robots. And that is such a narrow-minded focus, really doesn't reflect well on the broad business impact. You can see here, Industry 4.0 has impact across business operations, whether it be on the product side, on the supply chain side, as well as the business growth side in terms of the customers. That could be, both on the sales and marketing and the post-sale support. So there's many dimensions to this, but again, the idea is it's got a pretty broad impact. And that impact, if you look at what I would call target value potential or different focus areas, and some of these numbers come from diverse sources, including KPI Digital, Microsoft, IBM, Deloitte, and McKinsey, you could see the numbers, right? So starting from the top left, from labor productivity increase to reduction in downtime, to system throughput increase, to inventory management, cost of quality improvement, and forecasting increase. You can see the numbers are substantial. What I wanted to do here is just take a couple of minutes just to look at some interesting, what I call market data points from some of the latest reports that just got released from very credible sources. So we'll look at some market data points from a global perspective. We'll drill down and look at a segment of Industry 4.0 with regards to industrial AI specifically. And then, given I think most of the audience here is largely Canadian based, we will drill down on the Canadian perspective. So very quickly here, I know there's a lot of information here, but I'll just flag a few points here. So you can see, starting on the top left, one of the highlights that came out of this state of smart manufacturing report from Rockwell, an excellent report, by the way. Over the next 5 years, the number one method that manufacturers plan to drive positive business outcome is through data analytics. And we keep rolling down, 40% increase over last year in terms of lack of ability to see data to make decisions. So there seems to be this recurring theme about challenges with data. Keep going. Key competitive differentiators include skilled workforce, but again, ability to use data to make decisions. And then you can see some of the other pieces on the right. 80% of manufacturers lack end-to-end supply chain planning, which is curious. Not surprising. You could see on the right there, technologies is top response for risk mitigation, whether it be internal or external factors. And you can see some of those factors listed there. And then finally, I4, smart manufacturing, is considered to hold the key to future success in realizing benefits across a wide spectrum, whether it be operations efficiency, ROI, workforce management, and increasingly sustainability. So that was a global perspective. If we look at the industrial AI perspective, even more curiosities here. Only a third, you see on the top left, currently regard AI as part of their digital transformation strategy. That's amazing. We're in 2023, and That to me is an intriguing number. Key benefits of AI, not surprising there in terms of better decision-making, cost savings, better planning, increased sustainability. And then look at the one on the bottom left. I found this somewhat surprising. Almost 2/3 don't even have specific metrics to measure AI. I mean, that to me is shocking, but it shows that there's tremendous challenges, but also opportunities to add value on the industrial AI front. And data issues, you look at the top right, data issues really dominate the challenges of AI adoption, as you can see there. And then understanding data's concept, the context is the biggest data challenge. And then the one maybe that's perhaps most curious of all, 40% do not even see AI as having a significant impact by 2030. I find that remarkable and shocking, but that's what it is. So that's an interesting set of stats that come from the Future of Industrial AI Manufacturing survey that just got released from the US. And if we look at the Canadian perspective, I just put a data point on the top left in terms of comparing the USA and Canada. The GDP impact is a little bit larger in the US. The number of jobs, if you use a gravity model, Canada, the US, they seem to be scaling well from that perspective. If we keep drilling down on the left there in the middle, 40% of manufacturers have yet to start or just beginning their digital transformation process. 90% of Canadian manufacturers are small businesses, which is a huge challenge because these small businesses play key roles in the supply chains of larger companies. And greater than 50% of Canadian manufacturers are using little or no AI in terms of advanced manufacturing technologies. In terms of I4 tech use, you can see the big focus areas, not surprising, on cybersecurity, cloud computing, and automation. Big data, though, is still not very much used, right? It's only about 30%. So that, again, represents an interesting opportunity to add value. And you could see some of the obstacles from an I4 perspective, whether it be integration into existing infrastructure. Again, the challenge of workers, which seems to be a recurring theme all over all industries, it seems. High costs and ROI uncertainty. And lack of government tax incentives, which I find interesting, given there's a lot of rich tax incentives in Canada, but it seems there's misconceptions about that across the country. This is a slide from NGen, just shows you the complexity of the smart manufacturing marketplace. There's a wide range of entities. Some of them are provincially based, some of them have national charters. And you could see the different focus areas on the top. So there's tremendous opportunity. I think Canada is a very dynamic ecosystem. I think NGen is doing a remarkable job, and AI4M obviously joined at the hip with NGen to advance this very critical agenda on Industry 4.0. Let's look at the pillars. I suspect some of you have seen a flavor of this, but you can see it's just going back to what I said earlier, this is not just about robots. There's so many pieces to it. You can see starting from the far right, from cybersecurity, digital twins, to additive manufacturing, to AR, to 5G and 4G, mobile infrastructure. I split out cloud computing to include as well edge computing, because edge computing is a different piece altogether. The skill sets and knowledge required for edge computing is very different from, let's call it, conventional cloud computing, with the horizontal vertical integration. Let's call it on the left there traditional big data. I call it traditional because now we've got this whole generative AI craze. And you could see that these range, the spectrum of technologies can be grouped. There's different groupings out there. There's one suggested one you could see at the bottom there in terms of data analytics, automation, connectivity, and cyber physical systems. If we drill a little into some of these, look at the generative AI use cases from a manufacturing perspective. Look, Gartner just came out with an interesting report. You could see the what's mapped on the left, the different use case areas, and then on the top, the different industries. And you could see, I put there in terms of those vertical arrows where manufacturing is impacted. And you could see, generative AI has a pretty wide range of application scope. The one that I just wanted to flag here is, you look at on the left there, synthetic data. Synthetic data it causes a lot of confusion as we move forward, toward the end of this decade. Predictions are most of the data out there will be synthetic data and unstructured data, right? So those two trends are presenting formidable challenges in terms of your data strategy roadmap and hence your associated Industry 4.0 roadmap. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later, but you could see again the significant impact across the manufacturing sector. If you look at those various technologies that I showed before, again, a study that just came out from this Rockwell Automation reports, they asked various executives, where are you invested and where did you see the biggest ROI over the last 12 months? I guess some of these should not be surprising, but you could see starting from the top left, we have process automation, machine integration, cloud, AI, ML, industrial IoT, and 5G. And you notice they're all invested in it. And you could see how they prioritized where they feel the biggest ROI is in. And each of those components, the whole data strategy piece is such a critical piece to enable some of the business outcomes that those technology areas are bringing to the table. So that's a bit of the background of Industry 4.0. What I wanted to do now is double click on some what I would call high value areas or Industry 4.0 themes, and you could see them here. Right? So I've got the IT, OT convergence, proactive maintenance, the automation piece, rethinking OE. OE is this metric that's been around for decades, and I think its value now is being rethought because of a number of reasons, and I4 is one of them, and then sustainability is such a critical piece. So let's start drilling down on each of those. So it looks like a busy chart, but really it's in many ways it's pretty straightforward. What I've done here is I've divided let's say the operations, let's say a manufacturing operation in terms of the IT OT world, and I've used here the International Society of Automation level definitions that you could see there. And you could see the description of each of those levels, the representative systems, and then the data flows and timing. You could see that on the right. And what I just wanted to highlight here is there's, I've intentionally showed this white space between IT and OT. And this is the so-called air gap that has traditionally existed between the IT and OT worlds. And with Industry 4.0, that air gap or that collision or convergence between the IT and OT worlds is accelerating. And that represents both challenges and opportunities. On the challenge front, the one that's screaming at us, or should be screaming at us, is the cybersecurity risks. As soon as you start connecting IT and OT, before you've had this natural firewall between these areas, now that they're fully integrated, this is like candy in a candy store for some of these cybersecurity threat actors. On the opportunity front, however, the integration of IT OT just presents some tremendous opportunities in terms of improved efficiency, addressing sustainability and productivity. So there's it really is a double-edged sword, but that's the IT OT convergence is an important consideration. And actually, if you drill down a little further, if I slice this up and look at it from a pure data perspective, there's some elements that are pure, let's call it pure high-level data-driven, and then there's other pieces as you move further down the chain, as you go from the IT world to the OT world, that are transaction or actually event-driven. So different kinds of triggers from a data perspective that are associated with this OT IT convergence piece. Let's shift gears now. So that was the first topic. The next one was on the cyber physical system. So just a quick definition here. What a real object is collecting, saving, and transmitting data, and you've got this virtual object which evaluates the data, simulates properties, values simulation, and transmits data. And you've got these digital threads, as they're called, between the real object and the virtual object. And the challenge is, are those threads manual or are they automated, as shown at the bottom? So the dotted line refers to a manual flow and the solid line refers to a data flow. So if we start mapping this, you can see on the top left, we have sort of our base model where all the information exchange is manual. And then as we move to the right, we have what's called the digital shadow, where the real object transmits information automatically to the virtual object, but the reverse is manual. And then you go to the digital generator, which is really the opposite of a digital shadow in terms of the handshaking between the real object and the virtual object. And then everything comes beautifully into a digital twin, where, as you can see on the bottom right, the handshaking is fully automated between the real object and the vertical object. And if you look at some of the studies in terms of digital twin that have just come out, these are the different use cases that are out there. These are all real, right? So if you look at the bottom right, you have twins for system prediction, then you move up, we go counterclockwise, twins for system simulation, interoperability, maintenance, system visualization, and product simulation. It just gives you a flavor of how digital twins are actually deployed today. Shift gears a little bit in terms of automation. I just wanted to flag this report that just came out. You could see the number of installations of industrial robots in the US, in Canada. Canada seems to scale well with the US, but again, you can see how both Canada and the US are behind on a per capita basis compared to, let's say, Germany, Korea, of course, Japan and China are on another level. One thing I wanted to flag here are these so-called cobots or collaborative robots that represent a growing fraction of the market. As of us here, they represent 10% of the global market, and they're growing rapidly. And why are cobots interesting? What I have there on the right is a perspective that comes out from the International Federation of Robotics in Germany, which shows the level of collaboration between humans and robots versus the safety features you could see that are plotted on the y-axis. And you can see where most of the collaborative robots are there in the middle. And really the highlight here is these cobot benefits. I think they're well appreciated. Again, we're still early in Canada and the US, but whether it be increased efficiency, as I show on the top left, improved safety, flexibility, and versatility, or reduce OpEx, the benefits are pretty well defined. And I think what I just wanted to highlight here is the cobot value proposition, in my mind, underscores the critical need for really looking at your data strategy to effectively address what I call the use case extension opportunity. In other words, you may be deploying a cobot because you've had efficiency concerns, but then, once you deploy that, you realize, goodness, this cobot can also contribute to my safety related KPIs, right? So that's an example of a use case extension. And so that complicates things from a data strategy perspective, but it just shows you that the opportunities are enormous, right? But you need to sift through that or manage that complexity with regards to the use case extension opportunity. OEE, sure, a lot of you have, I've been dealing with this term for especially the older folk. One of the challenges with OEE, OEE is often portrayed as a percentage in terms of downtime, performance, and quality, but I think it's more useful to rethink of it in terms of a financial KPI, and you can break down the constituent components of OEE in terms of the cost of downtime, cost of performance, and cost of quality. So that's I think is very helpful in terms of simplifying how to deal with OEE. In terms of Industry 4.0, OEE and OEE, you could see the key pieces here. Industry 4.0 really enables a significant increase in the accuracy of OEE, and because you have a significant increase in the accuracy of the OEE, then you've got an opportunity to really have a more accurate objective tool to measure ROI for Industry 4.0 initiatives. And then the other key piece is that OEE and Industry 4.0 have strong interlocks with corporate sustainability objectives. There's other key metrics with OEE, as you could see there. I mean, OEE, as you can see on the bottom, focuses on schedule time, overall operations effectiveness, or OOE, takes into account so-called unscheduled time, and then total effective equipment performance. You can see on the top, TEEP considers the maximum time. So you have all these different metrics that should be considered in your I4 strategy. I call this my Moneyball chart. So it's a busy chart, but really tries to encapsulate how the world of OEE is shifting quite significantly. So what have I done here? I've plotted the technology evolution on the y-axis, and then on the x-axis, I'm showing what I call the shifting OEE perspective. So up until recently, I guess the OEE has been what I call in this conventional mode, where we've been dealing with this distinct IT and OT infrastructure with their air gap. And as you can see, as you move up the chain there on the y-axis, we've got challenges and opportunities that are afforded by this IT-OT convergence, the shift to what I call industrial data ops, the introduction of all these cool new technologies like 5G and edge compute, industrial IoT. And even this thing called the industrial metaverse. There's another term that marketeers have been having a field day with. In fact, the industrial metaverse and I4 have been used interchangeably, but I'd like to think of the industrial metaverse as a component in terms of a broader I4 strategy. But again, that's yet another term that adds confusion in the mix. And you can see from an OE perspective, as you move up that technology stack, the conventional OE now is being sliced or optimized with regards to specific industries. And what I'm showing there, you can see the Venn diagrams there on the right with regards to manufacturing, logistics, and mining have their own distinct OEEs, if you will. So that didn't really exist years ago, and I think it's starting to emerge in a very significant way. And then as we move further up the stack, then we get into this very interesting world, which I've called the OE plus world, where there's a lot more opportunities to add value and business impact. And I've listed some of those. And so, for example, adding proactive digital twins, or on the top right there, an enhanced OE perspective via, let's call it a 3D real-time virtual walk-by through the factory floor, for example, right? So there's tremendous opportunities to add value. I think this OE metric, which used to be this old metric that was standardized, I think now is getting new legs just because of the shifting perspectives and the new technology that are available through Industry 4.0. Shift gears now to proactive maintenance. A lot of confusion about this. What exactly is proactive maintenance? So what I've done here, I've just simplified, the whole maintenance strategy solution spectrum. So on the right, you can see what I've lumped in as proactive maintenance has components of preventive maintenance, and preventive maintenance has what I call a time-based and a usage-based component. And then moving to the right, you have what's called condition-based maintenance, predictive maintenance, and prescriptive maintenance. And on the far left, you have, believe it or not, there are entities, manufacturers that are not investing, and they're in very reactive mode, run to failure maintenance. And so what I've done here is I've plotted the asset health on the y-axis and time on the right. There's two curves there, but if you could just focus your attention on the top curve, the gray curve, there's three blue bullets there that you could see on the top left. It's the failure or the system degrade onset. And then as we move down that curve, you have the failure can be potentially detected. And then finally on the far right, the bottom, you have the failure occurs. And what I've done there is I've mapped different approaches, prescriptive, predictive, condition-based, and where they fall onto that curve in terms of how those different failure scenarios or data points occur. And you notice on the preventive maintenance, you may be well versed in preventive maintenance, but in the end, the preventive maintenance may be too early, as I show on the top left, or it may be too late. And so there is a challenge in terms of following the data to drive an effective strategy from a predictive and prescriptive as well as preventative perspective, right? And you can see also on the bottom, I've added a repair cost. Obviously, as you move forward, the repair costs and the risks increase. So having an optimal data-driven maintenance strategy is critical to minimize costs. What I've done here is I've just plotted the maintenance strategy in terms of those different maintenance strategy elements, an asset assessment curve on the left, where I show the complexity, the degree of complexity versus criticality of those different solution approaches. And then on the right, you could see the maintenance strategy value in terms of the asset availability and repair cost savings versus the actual installation costs. So not surprisingly, as you move from reactive all the way to prescriptive, you're moving on the top right of these curves. Sustainability is the last piece of those themes that I mentioned. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen this before. I think there's a lot of confusion between green manufacturing and sustainable manufacturing. Green is all about reusing, reducing, and recycling. And with sustainable manufacturing, you're also looking at remanufacturing, you're looking at recovery and related factors. So it is a different game. So really, in my mind, green manufacturing is essentially a subset of sustainable manufacturing. And indeed, what's interesting is, again, this report that I quoted before from Rockwell, they came out with some interesting highlights to show that sustainability is now recognized not only for its positive social impact, but for its operational improvement capabilities and impacting the bottom line positively, right? And you could see on the left, what I showed is the strong Industry 4.0 interlocks in terms of from a sustainable manufacturer. That includes improving efficiencies, the competitive differentiator, and addressing environmental issues. So Industry 4.0 and sustainable manufacturing are increasingly joined at the hip. A couple of points here on challenges as we approach the end of this presentation. Typical challenges we're seeing in Industry 4.0, assessing where you are in your journey. So that's one piece. Solidifying a data foundation. There's many components to that, including data governance, data strategy, data management, etc. Defining your key KPIs. It's not just about OE. There's other metrics that would come into the fold. Aligning your Industry 4.0 transformation issues with other programs, for example, your cloud journey, your deployment of modern data architectures, for example. Another piece, which I think is frequently overlooked, it's an afterthought, is preparing your stakeholders, employees, and partners for change. Change management always seems to be after the fact, and I think it should be front and center with any of these transformation programs, and particularly with something as disruptive as Industry 4.0. And then this managing this IT OT convergence, I think, is a critical piece in terms of some of the challenges with Industry 4.0. Sort of summarizing in terms of an approach to developing a high value I4 playbook, just starting from the top left, focusing on critical real businesses with well-defined target business outcomes. It seems that should be straightforward, and yet so many companies that we've dealt with and I've dealt with seem to be, if I can use the proverbial deer stuck in the headlights, right? It's just amazing how, I guess because of all the complexity that's out there, they just don't know where to start. So starting with that piece, I think, is critical. Segmenting the manufacturing network. So your manufacturing network may consist of multiple sites. So, but even within a site, you have a complex network. So the idea is to find a target area in your manufacturing network where you want to start piloting or installing a POC to drive an I4 value proposition. I think that's key. And then formalizing the context specific value by aligning these I4 use cases to the current digital maturity and the data needs. I think that's key. Developing the vision, of course, that multi-year vision. It could be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, but the vision to me is critical. And as part of that vision, you have these what I call these prioritized I4 use case bundling and related change story, which needs to be part of that vision. And that vision then translates into the next piece that you see there, which is designing a low-risk, pragmatic, digital data strategy, smart manufacturing roadmap. And I'll have something to say on that on the next slide. And then, of course, aligning the key stakeholders and solidifying leadership buy-in is the last piece of the puzzle, if you will. If we drill down into the actual roadmap, it starts at the top, right? So you're for not early adopt, but I guess if you're early in your journey, you're not as mature. So the initial focus is on digital connectivity, addressing or leveraging a wide range of these I4 technologies. But really the focus is, as you can see on the right there, is on improving your operation excellence. And you do that through improvements in productivity, quality, and efficiency, and risk managing through advanced analytics. That's sort of the initial focus here. And once you get comfortable with that, you start moving to the next stage, which is what I call digital engineering. Really, the focus there is on improving growth. And improving growth has multiple pieces to it, including enhancing the product design, supply chains, enabling what I call upstream, downstream connected ecosystems. You can see, again, the role of data in that is so critical. And then finally, as you've started to mature even more, then you're really starting to look at I4 as a vehicle for increased competitive differentiation. So looking at new markets, new services, and business models. So that's basically in a nutshell. And that's what I just wanted to end with is from KPI Digital's perspective, how do we drive toward a high business value and pragmatic I4 roadmap? For us, it's pretty straightforward. We have a very structured engagement approach. I mentioned that in the beginning, where we really start with what I call an I4 workshop. Our typical workshops are just half days. Having key stakeholders at this workshop with well-defined topics in advance, I think, is a critical success factor. These workshops are typically offered free of charge. And what we do is this drives what I call a first order, achievable, execution ready I4 roadmap. And then you can look at the different phases of the roadmap following the workshop, which as I said is typically a half day, we then move into our very structured engagement approach, which includes an assessment phase, which runs a couple of weeks, a crawl phase, which may run into months, and then a walk phase, which then runs into quarters, and then the run phase follows thereafter, right? So that's our approach. I just wanted to finish with that. That's all I have to say today. I think I'm doing pretty good on time, Nicole, but I will stop there. That was basically all I had to say. I look forward if there's any questions now or any follow-on questions, please feel free to reach out to me through my email contact or through LinkedIn. It'll be my pleasure to continue the conversation with you.
Awesome. Thank you, John. That was very interesting and engaging. We do have some questions from the Q&A that we can start with and then kind of have a discussion about that. So let's start with the first one here. Are there any risks associated with Industry 4.0 solution implementation?
The risks are significant. As I mentioned, I think one of the big ones I was trying to focus on earlier was the convergence of IT and OT infrastructures. Although offers tremendous opportunities, just the cybersecurity threat alone is a monster threat, right? And that underscores, in my mind, the criticality for having a very strong data foundation. If you have problems with your current data foundation, as that convergence accelerates, you will be heavily exposed, right? So that's a key piece I wanted to highlight on that.
Awesome. And then feel free to go back to this slide if you would like, but the next question is, what is the difference between condition-based and predictive-based maintenance? I'm assuming it's not in there, but we can assume that.
Yeah.
And then to build on top of that, why can't predictive be done in the middle region of the curve?
It could, look, it all depends context. That was a perspective that I put on the table. Condition-based, you may have certain predefined conditions. This goes beyond, let's say, your runtime or your preventive maintenance, which could be usage-based or time-based, right? There may be other conditions that are very specific to the equipment that you know in advance, and depending how those conditions evolve, those will trigger an action, right? So the question is, do you follow a condition-based approach, or can you be even more proactive and follow a predictive or prescriptive approach? And that's what was the message there, right? Condition-based is as you go up that maintenance strategy value, right? So condition-based adds value, then you add predictive and prescriptive, that adds more value in terms of your ROI and your de-risking, if you will. Good question.
To build off that as well, how do you suggest we get started on an Industry 4.0 journey? Is our next question.
Wonder who asked that. Well, that was just my last slide. That was my last slide, right? So to me, it's you don't. If I can quote my CEO Benny Cohen, you don't know what you don't know. So it's a challenge, right? So to get out of this deer in the headlight caught syndrome, you start with starting to build some momentum internally with regards to key stakeholders who are aligned with some high level vision to address metrics. And then what we suggest is you start bringing some of these stakeholders together in a form of a workshop that we can easily facilitate. And I think that's a natural starting point. The cost to the business is just your time, and it really provides what I call a very compelling strategy assist that can help inform your next steps, where you're actually spending real dollars opposed to just sitting at a table and having a very productive exchange on the challenges, risks, and objectives. So that's my humble recommendation, is that's how you start.
Awesome. And just to build on that, I know at AI for Manufacturing Canada, we talk a lot about what manufacturers kind of, before even starting, going to outside companies and stuff like that. Is there any tips you could give manufacturers for internal tips on how to get ready and knowing when to take the first step? Hence, if it's your data is ready, or if it's your processes and stuff like that are ready. Do you have any insights you'd like to share there?
Well, certainly, I mean, you could see from my theme and also from my our corporate perspective is heavy on the data strategy piece, right? To me, it's all about the data. So if you don't have some of your key data foundational elements in place, this, what I call I4 tsunami, is just going to push you off the cliff in the coming years. So to me, that's where you should start looking internally, see where you are with some of your data foundational pieces. And I think that's where an I4 strategy roadmap, if you will, would start, right? So doing an internal assessment, your current digital maturity assessment with regards to where you are, particularly on your data value chain, I think that's that to me is a starting point. And to do that, as I mentioned before, having some internal stakeholders, perhaps setting up what I would call an I4 center of excellence within the company. Doesn't mean a lot of people, right? It could be 3 or 4 people with different focus areas who get together and you start defining some objectives, but it does start with looking at some of those data foundational elements, which have to be tied into some broader business objectives. So that's what I would initially recommend. That's an interesting tidbit. And if you want to pursue that further, as I said, a workshop would be a beautiful way to build momentum to help bring a lot of the key stakeholders forward in your company.
Awesome, for sure. Have to agree with you there. Another question we have here is, how do you sell ROI to management to take on the digital transformation project?
That's a loaded question. How do you sell ROI? Well, so to me, it's understanding, what your senior management is focused on. What are the business objectives and outcomes that they're trying to achieve, right? So when you're, often with I4, everybody gets caught up in this technology piece. Let's try to do this interesting POC with this technology and so forth. But in the end, if the outcome, the target outcome of that particular use case that you're looking for is not aligned with these objectives, you're wasting your time, right? So to me, it really starts with having a critical alignment with your upper leadership in terms of what are the objectives, short-term and longer term, they're trying to achieve. And you want to ensure that whatever interesting use case you're looking to bring to the table, whatever ROI is there is aligned with those use cases. One piece I would say, though, that's getting a lot of executives' time now is across the board in manufacturing is sustainability. So I'm sure if you throw in sustainability in the wrench in terms of your ROI, I think it's going to get their attention as well, right? So having a well-defined use case with some pretty concrete sustainability outcomes is a strong way to get the attention of your leadership as well.
For sure, I'd have to agree with you. I think as well, this next question might be a copy of the last, but we'll see your insights here. How do you feel Industry 4.0 can help manufacturers become more competitive?
That was a theme, right? I mentioned that that came out at some of the reports as well. But in the end, it's just if you look at the broad impact of Industry 4.0, as I mentioned, Industry 4.0 is not about a particular technology. I think there's a lot of misgivings about that or misinformation. It's really you got to look from a more holistic perspective. It impacts operations, impacts your customers, and so forth, right? So a well-greased I4, optimized organization has tremendous opportunities, as I mentioned earlier, to look at new markets, new products, and new angles for competitive differentiation, just because everything is just so fully integrated. Data is being used, it's not being lost. So there's just so many tremendous opportunities for differentiation and competitive or positive competitive dynamics once you start moving forward with some of these I4 optimized solutions.
For sure. And then one last one here. Do you have any recommendations on technologies that would help manufacturers implement Gartner terms digital twins of organization, or DTO?
I'm going to throw that back to the individual who said that, right? So it's myself as a technology veteran, I'm really overwhelmed sometimes and very curious about all these technologies. But I would step away from the technology and look at from a high level approach. What are you trying to do? What is your business objective? And what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve? If you can't get that clear in your mind, there's no point tinkering with specific technology implementations. In my mind, it really starts there. And then you start moving south in terms of, okay, what are the technical approaches that help me meet that business goal and outcome, right? And then there's many options today. I think one of the challenges you mentioned about digital twins to be aware of is there's so many components to these digital twins. There's a diversity of it's only a diversity of technologies, but it's also a convergence of these technologies. That's another critical piece that adds to the complexity of the landscape. And this is where, again, having a well-defined business objective and outcome is critical, because you can easily get lost in all these technology questions. So that's my humble recommend. I didn't really answer it directly, but I'm throwing it back because I think there's a more important question there than the actual technology discussion. But I suspect we can have a full day discussion just on technology options. But whoever asked that question, feel free to reach out to me and we can explore that separately. But that's my answer.
For sure. No, good one as well. And then I'd like to open up to the floor if anybody wants to hop off mic and feel free to shout out any questions you have. I also have one for you, John. In your slides, you mentioned that 40% of manufacturers have yet to or are just starting the process of digitalization. I'm curious what kind of the biggest hesitations you guys see in the marketplace around manufacturers adopting technology, and could you chat about, those hesitations you're seeing and how you guys overcome them?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. There's different opinions on that, but to me, it's a lot of companies are just focused on their day-to-day, and they are struggling. I think it's with two pieces really. It's how do you manage or simplify this growing complexity at scale and speed, and then the second piece is this whole skills issue, right? So everybody is so concerned about their employees and having the right skills and so forth. So I think these are the two big challenges in my mind that are preventing a lot of companies from moving aggressively on these digital transformation programs. Some of them too, if you notice, there was one data point in the Canadian market about lack of government incentives, which I found surprising. That tells me they're not doing their homework, because there's plenty of incentives out there, whether it be provincial or federal based. That's something we can help you with as well, by the way. So I think there's some misinformation. People are not, they're not digging in to see what's available to help support, accelerate. But really, those are the two big challenges that I see. And how do you manage those challenges? As I mentioned, you have to start going down to fundamentals. What's the business strategy? What are your short and longer term objectives? What are the outcomes you're trying to achieve? And then based on that alignment, then you've got all sorts of use cases that trickle down in terms of your digital transformation roadmap. But really, that's how it starts. Anyway, that's my simplified answer, but it's a good loaded question. Thanks, Nicole, for that one.
Awesome. Yeah, any last takers for any questions? Feel free to raise your hands and get involved. We can wrap it up a little bit early if we'd like. Yeah. One more question, just to leave us kind of on a future forward thought here. I know you mentioned 5G technologies and kind of your background within that space. And I know we get a lot of questions here at AI for Manufacturing about kind of what is 5G, where is it going, and how to really address it outside of the buzzwords and key terms. So I'm curious, what are your insights on kind of 5G and where it's going, especially for manufacturers in the next couple of years?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I think there's been a lot of talk, in Canada, as you know, there's all sorts of geopolitical overtones with 5G because of Huawei, the arrest of the CFO of Huawei and so forth, the investment in 5G technology. I guess for most consumers who have 5G phones, they're wondering, well, what's the big deal? But really, what's being missed here is that 5G, unlike the previous 4 generations of technology, is fundamentally a B2B play. The first 4 generations of mobile were effectively a B2C play with some associated B2B. Really, 5G has been designed, there's a seismic shift from B2C to B2B. And from a manufacturer's perspective, things like private 5G are gaining a lot of traction. in the US, in Europe. You look at automotive manufacturers, for example, it is a big deal. In Canada, we're somewhat behind because in order to enable some of these pieces, you need spectrum. So the Canadian government needs to start moving forward and start freeing up some spectrum that will enable some of these creative 5G applications. The US is ahead of the curve on from that perspective. So it's coming. We're still in the early phases of this, but 5G will have a dramatic impact, particularly from a private 5G perspective, some very creative business models. And in the end, what 5G does is provides a very compelling connectivity layer. And in the end, that connectivity layer is going to drive all sorts of new data sets, new data requirements, new data richness, all sorts of possibilities downstream in terms of the creativity of the use cases that will be enabled by this next generation connectivity layer.
For sure. No, I have to agree with you. And it's definitely an exciting space to kind of keep an eye on and see the growth within it. With that, I think we can wrap today's session up. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, John, for taking the time and going through your slides. It was awesome to learn a bit more about what you guys are up to.
Thanks for the opportunity, Nicole. Like I said, everyone here, feel free to connect with us afterwards. We have a lot I believe we can help you with, and look forward to continue the conversation with you, and enjoy the rest of the weeks and the rest of the summer. Hopefully it's going to be smoke-free wherever you're at. Had to have that.